And welcome to it, a Star Wars show. I'm your host, John Justice. I'm glad that you are here for another episode. As always, if you want to email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment if you happen to be enjoying the show up on YouTube. So, the focus of this week's show is essentially going to end up being your listener feedback emails from last week. I'm going to keep it relatively short because this is the week of celebration, Star Wars celebration in Japan, with the panels taking place this coming weekend, with the anticipation of trailers dropping, most specifically a lot of expectation and hype around potentially seeing a full teaser trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu, which comes out about 1 year from now. There's going to be a lot of breaking news this weekend relating to Star Wars. So, in terms of coverage here from a Star Wars show and your host, the intention is for the big news items, I will be posting another podcast later on this weekend. Once we get past Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday, we should have the bulk of the major news that will be announced at Star Wars Celebration Japan. So I'll be sitting down and recording another episode to give you all of the latest details. It's interesting because, unfortunately, there's not nearly as much hype around this year's celebration event as there has been in previous years. I think it's partly due to the fact that this is taking place in Japan this year, but I also believe that it speaks to sort of the spot that Star Wars is in right now and what we've been talking about on the show so often. It'll be very interesting to see what actually gets announced this weekend. There's expectations relating to Ahsoka Season 2. I believe there's a lengthy panel for Ahsoka. There is no specific panel relating to the future of Star Wars, wherein typically during a celebration event, there's at least one panel where the expectation is we're going to get a bunch of announcements. Not sure that we're not going to get announcements, just not entirely sure when that's going to take place. The focus is obviously going to be around Andor, which drops in less than 1 week from today with a 2.5 hour, 3-episode debut. We'll, of course, have coverage of that on the show. Still not 100% sure exactly how I'm going to be partaking and watching that. But I do intend next week to watch those first 3 episodes before we get into the actual podcast on Thursday or Friday of next week. So for this week, I do have quite a few emails to share with you, and I'm so appreciative to everybody who's written in or left a comment up on YouTube. And just keep an eye out, because I will be posting at least one more other podcast heading into the weekend, or a few, depending on what announcements we get, what footage gets released from Star Wars Celebration. And if you happen to be attending and you want to reach out and let me know firsthand your experience and what you're hearing, you can always do that. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
My most popular Star Wars podcast, easily, is my Raylo, the greatest love story Star Wars ever told show that I did. Oh gosh, I have to go back and look. I mean, it's probably 2 years old now, at least. I always get this trickling of people emailing me who end up coming across that particular episode, where I just lay out in my opinion over the course of 45 minutes or so my view of Raylo, what they were trying to accomplish in the sequel trilogy, and why I thought it actually worked. I'm not one of those individuals who got overly upset over the way that they played out, the way that the Rise of Skywalker played out, and how Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, ended up in the situation and ended up with the fate that he ended up with. There was a recent post by an editor on that film that said, The Rise of Skywalker, that said that they shot some 15 different takes, and that the kiss at the end of The Rise of Skywalker was something that was heavily debated over whether or not they were going to include it. I love that moment in the film. It is the picture that I used for the graphic for this particular podcast. And I have an email that came in regarding that particular show. And as it typically happens, this individual has a very strong opinion over the way that the dyad and Raylo played out. So, Highball, Heibal, 1173, writes this on YouTube. There is no point in building up a dyad if they're just going to rip them apart, saying that's how it had to be. They should have defeated Palpatine together, not just Rey and all the Jedi, with an eye roll emoji. It was ridiculous. As horrible as Palpatine was, there have been greater threats to the galaxy, and when did all the dead Jedi come to help then? This isn't how it works. And Ben was just casually tossed to the side. If anything, Ben, the last Skywalker, should have been the one to bring Palpatine down, not random Rey. It just ruined the poetic justice and the potential poetic justice and completely ignored their beautiful and powerful dyad. The Last Jedi showed you a glimpse of what it could be like when they worked together, but then they never really show it again. The galaxy will still be unbalanced after this, and they're meant to rebuild and balance it together. All capital letters, exclamation point. The yin and yang of the Force, starting a new legacy and bringing back the Jedi, but doing it right this time. Ugh. They screwed up so bad. And no, he absolutely did not need to die. It entirely contradicted his entire purpose. It's devastating and infuriating. In response to Raylo, the greatest love story show, which if you haven't ever checked it out, I encourage you to go and do so. It's on my feed. You can search for it via the title that I just shared. I have a different take than what the writer whose comments I just read had. And I would encourage you to go check it out. I won't repeat them all here. As I've said many times on the show, my view of Star Wars is I look at these as historical documents. This is what played out. Now, you don't have to like what played out, but this is what played out. And I personally have a lot of respect for what JJ and Chris Terrio were trying to accomplish and the Herculean task that they were handed in having to not only bring this trilogy to a close, which obviously had its issues, but also bring the entire franchise up until now to a close. And I thought they did an admirable job. And I personally like the way that it played out. When you consider all of the variances and the variables within these characters, and specifically Kylo Ren and Ben Solo, I completely understand and agree with the way that they ended up handling that relationship and Kylo's fate at the end of that movie. Not everybody disagrees, and that's okay. It's all subjective in the end. All right, Brittany J. Taylor writes this. I hope Thrawn fights the Grisk. The Grisk, an enemy from many of the novels, talking about the future of what could take place within the Mandoverse. The Mandoverse, I am unfamiliar with the Grisk because I have not read the novels attached to those particular villains in Star Wars. However, I do know that those that have read those books are big fans of that particular species, and not the first time that I've heard that they hope that it makes an introduction into the proper canon of Star Wars in live action. Let's see. 88 Strange 88 writes this regarding how you're going to watch Andor Season 2. I would like to see this in one sitting each week, but getting the family together to watch is very hard to do. I will be watching one episode at a time, probably over 6 to 8 weeks. Also, I think I have the original trilogy sans the special editions on DVD. We'll need to dig that up. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do next week is I'm going to watch the entirety of the first 3 episodes and then see, what transpires in the coming weeks. I think there'll be a lot to unpack in those first few episodes, and I definitely want to be able to spend time on next week's show to talk about it. Friend of the show, Star Wars Santa. Again, always a fantastic watch up on YouTube. The source of the 1977 Star Wars print that I discussed on last week's episode. The prints in this year's program have many stories to tell, according to the press release for this British screening. There's the original unfaded dye transfer IB Technicolor British release print of Star Wars from 1977, preserved in the BFI National Archive and ready to transport us to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, back to the moment in 1977 when George Lucas's vision cast a spell on cinema audiences. BFI, it writes BFI. It seems the British Film Institute preserves films, and they're pulling this from their own archives. Thank you so much for digging that up, Star Wars Santa. And, I wonder what the best quality version of the original trilogy untouched is. I mean, maybe this is the version. Listen, I would not turn down having a 4K transfer original version of Star Wars in my collection. I mean, despite your opinion on whether or not you like the special editions or don't, who would not want to have that? I would absolutely want to have that. Now, do I need that? No, I don't need that. If they never produce that, will I be sad? No, I won't be sad. But if Lucasfilm ever decided to go ahead and take, say, a print like this, if it's preserved as well as one would hope that it would be from 1977, and it provides the opportunity to do a proper upscaling to 4K to see the original version, I would absolutely get my hands on it. And if I were there and had the ability to go watch this, I absolutely would. All that said, the versions that George Lucas calls his final versions, I very much appreciate and enjoy. So, again, thank you for that, Star Wars Santa. Greatly appreciate you digging that up. I probably could have done that myself, I suppose. All right, let's go and hear from Ray, 2017, writes this. Did you catch one of the latest interviews of Tony Gilroy praising The Mandalorian and crediting Filoni and Favreau for helping him give the boost for Andor and putting an end to any so-called feud that basically doesn't exist between the creatives, and it's just some fans using their overpraise for the show to put down everyone else? They go on to say, look, I love the Andor series, but my God, some people are just absolutely annoyingly insufferable about it. Okay, rant over. In all seriousness, as we continue to go forward with the franchise and we're seeking to go into these various directions, it's important that we continue to flesh out the genre. Andor and The Mandalorian helped kickstart the Disney Plus era. Where else this franchise can go outside of the Skywalker storyline and still remain true to George Lucas's roots. We can have our political dramas and Western serials in the same place. And yes, we can also have the Ahsokas. We want Magic Space Whales, The World Between Worlds, and Rocky Ninja Turtles. No, you're absolutely correct. It is really interesting. I'd like to write a book just on the fandom aspect of all this. I just find it immensely fascinating. The absolutist attitude on so many different levels. The people who just adamantly go and say Star Wars is dead and it died on this date with this show, and it varies from person to person. Or the people that go, Andor is the only thing good that they have done. That is pure Star Wars. I'm with Ray 2017. You can have everything. Tony Gilroy made a comment recently. I think he spilled the beans, but apparently they're working on a Star Wars horror show. I don't know what capacity that would be in, but it certainly could be interesting. I was listening to the Rewatchables podcast, which I believe I brought up many times before. Bill Simmons and the Ringer Network, and they just cover rewatchable movies. This week, they're doing one of my favorite teen comedies from the 90s, and that is Can't Hardly Wait. And in listening to the podcast driving home and thinking about recording today's Star Wars show, I suddenly had this idea, because they were discussing how they wished that there would be a once-a-year teen movie based on a house party. Because basically, Can't Hardly Wait the idea was lifted from Say Anything, and the house party scene at the beginning of Say Anything, and the idea was, well, what if that was the whole movie, just a house party? So I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun, kind of in the same spirit as what they did with Skeleton Crew and the young kids going on an adventure, having that harken back to Goonies and Amblin. Wouldn't it be fun to go and set up some sort of teen version in the Star Wars universe of a bunch of Star Wars teens arriving to a certain location for a Star Wars version of a house party and all of the mayhem that would ensue? I envisioned a scenario of young pilots with their first starships, cobbled together X-Wings or Y-Wings and A-Wings, or maybe even a TIE fighter built of parts, and they all sort of arrive in a central location for some celebration that turns into what you typically see of a house party in teen movies like Can't Hardly Wait. My mind was just spinning with ideas of the calamity and comedy that could ensue, including having somebody at the party end up having a lightsaber for some reason, and the chaos that ends up wreaking on the home in and of itself. I just thought that it would be a fun idea. So, just going back to Star Wars exploring other genres, I think there should always be a place where we have new content creators and writers continuing to carry on with the legacy of what George Lucas originally created with that original trilogy. And Lucasfilm has done that in various ways. More on the fantasy side when you look at something like Ahsoka, but you have a hero's journey story there, certainly starting with Rebels and Ezra leading into the Ahsoka show. But at the same time, right, we also have these other shows like Andor. I don't necessarily go and look at Andor being a show that carries on the legacy of George Lucas. I see Andor being more towards something that caters to something akin to political shows and thrillers, even though it's the run-up to the original trilogy. So, again, all of this is to just repeat what Ray 2017 said, and that there's room for all different kinds of genres within Star Wars. All right, listen, that wraps up the show for this week. A little longer than I even expected, but I will be back later on this weekend to talk about all of the announcements taking place at Star Wars Celebration. So be sure to keep an eye out on your feeds or keep an eye on my page on YouTube, and I'll be sure to give you all of the biggest news to come out of Star Wars Celebration Japan. And before I leave you, as always, you love science fiction. If you like to read or listen to sci-fi, I hope you'll take a moment and head on over to Amazon.com and check out my science fiction space opera adventure series called EMBARK. Follow Taft, Katha, and their ragtag crew aboard the infamous Anniversary as they fight for humanity's future far from where it started. It is a fun, fast-paced, and action-packed science fiction adventure without any agenda. There are 7 books in all in the series, 2 trilogies connected by a spin-off story that serves as book 4 in the series. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. I wrote it for adults, but it's absolutely age-appropriate for those 11 and older. Do me a favor, pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. You won't be disappointed. It's available in hardcover, paperback, Kindle Unlimited, free if you are a Kindle Unlimited user. Also, ebook as well, and audiobook. Go to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK, EMBARK, and John J.O.N. Justice, and you'll find the entire series there. Listen, until I talk to you in the next few days, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. And we'll have all that information coming out of Star Wars Celebration Japan. Until then, take care, and God bless. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My nerd world.